Tonight on Joy News Prime, President Akufo-Addo directs Auditor General Daniel Domelevo to take its accumulated annual leave of 123 working days. But it's emerging that board chairman of the audit service and the board instigated the move.
When he was ready to go on leave, he said, we cannot ask him to go on leave because we did not appoint him. So anytime we asked him to go on leave, he said he will not go because we did not appoint him. So now it is the appointing authority who has asked him to go.
And the minority NDC in Parliament gives government one-day ultimatum to withdraw military personnel from Ketu South in the Volta region.
Whoever has deployed the military personnel to our borders should call them back immediately. We are giving them up to the end of tomorrow, Tuesday.
But Defense Minister Dominic Nitiwo says the deployment will remain in place until President Akufo-Addo lifts restrictions.
We are preventing people from coming into our country so that Ghanaians are safe from this deadly COVID disease. Once the borders are extended, their stay will be extended.
Also, Member of Parliament for Dansia Sokwaketi Hammond, whose utterances sparked this controversy, refuses to apologize.
Something quite abominable. I don't understand. But if
do you then regret making those statements?
Nonsense. What do you mean by, you see, you are compounding the situation by this question you just asked. Why do I regret when I was stating a fact?
Later on in business, Private Enterprise Federation calls for stiffer sanctions against businesses quoting goods. Sandra S. Namapeno has more on that.
Yes, Gipsy, like you said, Private Enterprise Federation calls for stiffer sanctions against businesses quoting goods and services in dollars. We have the details coming up in business.
It should not be dollarized because in most countries you can do that. So Bank of Ghana is in the right approach when they say that you cannot do anything with the dollar market. So that is a no-go area that I support 100%.
Sandra is now standing by to bring us more on that. Also coming up, Health Minister Kwaku Agyeman resumes work after recovering from COVID-19. He started his day with this advice.
I also want to announce to the world that I've recovered and discharged, and I'm fully very well, but I'll take off a few days. So the disease is real, and it is with us.
Details and more of that coming up. My name is Gifty Ando Apia. We are live in our studios here in Kokomlemle on digital address GA0992539. On digital terrestrial TV, we are free to air. The bulletin is also live on DSTV 421, GoTV 144. Please stay tuned. You're welcome to Joy News Prime. President Akufo-Addo has asked the Auditor General Daniel Domelevo to take his accumulated annual leave of 123 days. A statement from the presidency said Mr. Domelevo is expected to begin the leave on Wednesday, July 1, 2020. We'll take you through some the details of that statement right now. Statement says President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo has directed Mr. Daniel Domelevo, the Auditor General, to take his accumulated annual leave of 123 days, according to records available to the presidency, with effect from Wednesday, 1st July 2020. The president's decision to direct Mr. Domelevo to take his accumulated annual leave is based on Section 21 and 31 of the Labour Act 2003, Act 651, which apply to all workers, including public office holders such as the Auditor General. It goes on to say that according to the Act, a worker is entitled to annual leave with full pay in every calendar year of continuous service, which cannot be relinquished or forgone by the worker or the employer. Since his appointment as Auditor General on 30th December 2016, the statement says Mr. Domelevo has taken only 9 working days of his accumulated annual leave of 132 working days. It would be recalled, it continues, that on 9th April 2009, the third president of the Fourth Republic, His Excellency, the late Professor John Evans Atta Mills, directed the then Auditor General, Mr. Mr. Edward Agyemang to proceed on leave. The statement goes on to indicate that the President Akufo-Addo took advice from this precedent set earlier by John Atta Mills. And it is in the final statement, the final paragraph, it says the Auditor General has been further directed to hand over all matters relating to his office to Mr. Johnson Ekwuamo Asiedu, the Deputy Auditor General, to act as Auditor General until his return from his well-deserved leave. Eugene Ahen, Director of Communications at the Jubilee House, signed that document. In the meantime, the board chairman of the Audit Service, Professor Edward Agyemang, says the board wrote to the presidency after the Auditor General refused to take annual leave.
What happened in my case was that I was given, if you want to accumulate your leave, you have to inform the chief of staff and give reasons why you are not going on leave. And in my case, it was just after 10 years, I was going on leave from time to time. And when they asked me to retire, that was my accumulated leave, so I had to go. So that's what happened. In my case, it was due prior to retirement.
You are board chair also. How did the board and everybody else in this organization allow such accumulation of leave if it is not the right thing to do?
Yeah, well, what happened in our case now as a board is that we have discussed the leave schedules for all staff. And we came to the auditor and we asked him when he was ready to go on leave. He said, we cannot ask him to go on leave because we did not appoint him. So anytime we asked him to go on leave, he said he will not go because we did not appoint him. So now it is the appointing authority who has asked him to go.
What do you say to those who are saying that this is just a deliberate attempt to get him out of office because of the trend of things he's taking up, standing up to people in government when it comes to the fight against corruption?
Yeah, but that's their view. It's not my view. It's what they are saying. It's their view. So I can't speak for them.
But is it?
No, what I'm saying is that this is their view. It's not my view. What I know is that every public servant is required to go on leave, and when the leave is due. And he decided that since his appointment in 2016, he has not attended any leave, so he has considered on leave. So it is not a question of whether because of it or whatever. If he has gone to audit some people, and he saw that the chief executive of that place has not gone on leave, he will report on it. That he has not, the chief executive has not gone on leave for 3 years. He would have reported on it and then asked the reason why he has not gone on leave. Why is it that the Auditor General has not gone on leave for 3 years? And people are reading into it political.
As board chair, your relationship with the Auditor General has not been that smooth. Do you think that may have influenced this decision?
No, it's not me, it's the board. It's a relationship with the board. It's not me, it's Agyemang. It's with the board.
Well, that's the board chair of the Audit Service speaking to me earlier on radio. Well, let's take a look at some of the audits that are conducted by the Auditor General Daniel Domelevo. Take a look at a list of those audits. So he was appointed, as you all know, and sworn in as new Auditor General of Ghana on 30th December 2016, just when the NDC was about leaving office. This generated controversy because, as you know, the preparations for John Mahama was to hand over power to Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, and those were underway. And following the change in government, he's carried out some special audit that saw government saved from honouring some 5.4 billion cedi debt. So that's the first one. That actually also shot him into fame. As from the 5.4 billion cedi debts that he helped the government to skip, he also took up other cases. In September 2018, he petitioned the presidency accusing the appointee who was serving as board chairman of the audit service, Professor Edward Dua-Agyeman, who you just heard, of unlawful interferences and violations. That's a quote of his constitutional mandate. Professor Dua-Agyeman denied those allegations. In October 2019, Mr. Domolevo issued a 1 million surcharge against the senior minister and other officials for paying audit firm Kroll and Associates for no work done. In December 2009, we know the senior minister sued the Auditor General challenging this surcharge. He later cited Mr. Domolevo for contempt of court after he failed to respond to the case within 14 days. Mr. Domolevo was found guilty of contempt of the court in May 2020. He was warned and let go. Mr. Domolevo also on numerous occasions stated that he is aware of moves to have him removed. He once said this on the Joy FM Super Morning Show. Let's go on with the things that he has done. In November 2019, IOCO commenced investigations into allegations of procurement breaches at the audit service with focus on the Auditor General, who they granted bail. And you saw the statement that Mr. Domolevo made on Super Morning Show. He says, I have said this and I will repeat it, that once you fight corruption, corruption will fight you back. And it will fight you in any way that it can, justifiably or unjustifiably. That's the statement or quote from a statement he made on Joy FM Super Morning Show some time back. And that's it. Those are some of the things that has characterized his office or his tenure of office, who is now being asked to go on leave. That is Daniel Domolevo, the Auditor General. Away from that, the minority NDC in Parliament has given government a one-day ultimatum to withdraw military personnel from Ketu South in the Volta region. Emmanuel Bejra, chairman of the Volta Regional Caucus, addressing a press conference in Aplau on Monday, stressed that the troops must be recalled to their barracks immediately. The troops were deployed days ago in a program that the Volta Regional Minister Archibald Lecha said is part of measures to control COVID-19 importation into Ghana.
We are not cowards. I want to repeat that. We are not cowards. We don't fear people. We only respect. And therefore, whoever has deployed the military personnel to our borders should call them back immediately. We are giving them up to the end of tomorrow, Tuesday. The military personnel must be recalled back to their barracks. There is no war between Ghanaians and Togolese. We are peace-loving people, and therefore we'll continue to love everybody equal.
But the party also says the deployment of military and other security personnel to the border towns in the Volta and Oti regions is creating panic and anxiety among residents. Member of Parliament for Adanse Asokwa K.T. Hammond had indicated that the troops were sent there to ensure foreigners do not get to register to vote in Ghana's elections or on the voter registration process. But speaking at the NDC's press conference in the Ketu South district of the Volta region, Member of Parliament for the area, Fifi Kwete, said the move by government is an insult to the intelligence of the people in the Volta region.
Is a recent shocking mass deployment of military personnel along the border towns of the Volta region. And similar deployment has been done in the Oti region, the northern region, the upper west and upper east regions as well. It is no coincidence that all these places happen to be strongholds of the opposition NDC. We will this morning touch particularly on the situation in the Ketu South municipality and other parts of the Volta region. We are in no doubt that this massive deployment of the military and other security personnel in the Ketu South municipality and other border towns of our region has been timed to coincide with the commencement of the voter registration exercise across the country. These deployments are creating panic and anxiety among residents of Ketu South and other affected towns and districts. The MC of Ketu South, who represent the presence here, has explained that the reason for the deployment of the military personnel is so that they can help check and approve routes to prevent foreigners who happen to be infected with COVID-19 from coming from neighboring Togo and risk increasing the cases of COVID in our country. Now, this position has been supported by the Volta Regional Minister, Dr. Lecha, as well. So this official reason being provided is not just hollow, it is laughable and actually represents an insult to the intelligence of our people.
Member of Parliament for the area there. In the meantime, the Director of Elections, Elvis Afriyie Ankrah, Director of Elections for the NDC, who led chants at the press conference, encouraged residents to resist any attempt by government to intimidate people in the region.
We don't want anybody to use this environment as an excuse to do anything against the democracy. That is why we are speaking out and sending a loud and clear warning. But there is no man, no woman, no devil, no military, no police, no soldier, no Akufo-Addo that can stop the will of the people. There is nothing, absolutely nothing that can stop a determined people who are willing to stand up for their rights. No electoral commission, no Supreme Court, no soldier, no parliament, nothing. There is nothing. There is a movement that is going on. The people of Ghana want change. This government has failed. They can eat all the gari in this world. They can go and drink all the sea in the Atlantic Ocean. Nothing will stop them from going down December 2020. So the problem is not Ashantis. The problem is not even Achims. The problem is Akufo-Addo and his small group of people who have decided to hijack power and manipulate the entire system to their political advantage. MPP people, wherever you are, you know that what your Akufo-Addo is doing is not good. It's destroying your own party.
Elvis Afriyie Ankrah there. Well, government has described as empty propaganda the NDC's claim that the military deployment to the Volta region is meant to prevent Ghanaians in neighboring Togo from participating in the voter registration exercise. Defense Minister Dominic Nitiwul told a press briefing in Accra the deployment, which was started way back in March, was to enforce COVID-19 restrictions along Ghana's borders. He said the deployment will remain in place until President Akufo-Addo lifts the restrictions on the borders and opens the country up.
We have deployed at the west, at the east, and at the north, and even at the south. What we are doing is to make the people of Ghana safe. And for the 24-hour, I think that, first of all, they did not even get their facts right. They assumed that we deployed only in Volta region, or especially Aflao only. I believe that if they are watching this press conference, they will revise their notes, and they should be bowing their heads in shame, because they lied to the people of Ghana. As we have all been told now, the numbers in Volta region are some of the lowest. In fact, Aflao has some of the lowest. Bogo has more than 45 soldiers. Aflao has about 16. So when you are giving ultimatum, are you giving ultimatum to those in northeast to also withdraw? Those in northern region to withdraw? Those are you speaking for those people as well? What about Upper West? So they should withdraw as well. When Tumu people are happy that the soldiers are there. When Boku people are happy the soldiers are there. And as the intelligence tells us, we keep deploying more of them to ensure that Ghana is totally safe.
Dominic Nitiwo has also been responding to claims that government deployed several soldiers to the border town in Aplau to intimidate residents. The minister says the Volta and Oti regions have the least number of personnel from the enhanced Operation Calm Life exercise. The chiefs in Aplau have issued a statement condemning what they say is the ransacking and searching of homes by the military men. The minister says the claims by Tobi Amenya Fiti V, Paramount Chief of Aplau and President of the Aplau Traditional Council, would be investigated. He also asked that the mandate of the soldiers on the ground does not extend to searching people's homes.
As for the searching of homes, that is not the mandate of the soldiers. So I will investigate that report that they have said. They are chiefs. So I'm not able to say that it's not true or it's a lie. No, they are chiefs. So I will investigate. That's not their mandate. And I'll be very, very surprised that any soldier will do such a thing. It's not their mandate. Unless somebody has committed a crime and ran to a home and the soldiers have been tasked to go and get that thief or that criminal. Otherwise, it's not their duty and they will not do that. But I will investigate it.
He also says that any Ghanaian outside the country would necessarily have to register with the Ghanaian embassy in that country and foots the bill for their mandatory 14-day quarantine period before they can proceed to participate in the exercise.
We ask the operatives, who are the soldiers, and the police and the GIS, Ghana Immigration Service, and of course GRA, to deploy troops to aid Ghana Immigration Service, who are the lead agency, to close up all the unapproved routes so that people don't come into this country and give us problems. Our borders are closed, and that must be respected. If you are a Ghanaian and you are in Togo or Ivory Coast or Benin or Burkina Faso, you want to come inside, the protocol is very clear. You go to the embassy, register, come in, quarantine yourself for 14 days, and then you can let go. But we will not, and let me repeat, we will not allow people to use unapproved routes and come into this country without quarantining themselves, because they may possibly carry the disease.
Defense Minister Dominic Nitiwo. Member of Parliament for Adansi Asukwa, Katie Hammond, has described as, quote, nonsense, calls for him to apologize over the comments that the opposition NDC criticized as ethnocentric. In a video that has gone viral, the MP justified the military deployment to the Volta region, a stronghold for the opposition NDC. His comment has infuriated natives of the region, and the opposition party, which is demanding an apology and retraction. In an interview with Joy News, however, the MP said he will not apologize, claiming there is an agenda against him.
My reference was to people in the Volta region who were not entitled to vote in the elections of Ghana. It's not just Volta region, it's like any other country who are not citizens of Ghana. Our elections are meant for people who are Ghanaians. But thanks to Joy FM and thanks to whatever political agenda, I don't know what it is, but clearly there is some agenda by your institution. Somehow you decided to cause me serious political difficulties, social difficulties. And,
I can assure you that we do not have any agenda against you in person.
No, you may not. You are not the person who came in there. Exactly. Number one, you are not the editor. So, in effect, you become, I guess, a ventriloquist also for the institution. I'm not attacking you. You can't defend them. You didn't put it out there.
Because I work for the institution, I know that we do not have any agenda against. You don't know the
level at which I mean, play at your level. Don't box at a level that you don't qualify. You do not know what actuated those people who put that one out there. They clearly would have actuated by some malice. I mean, I come for the life of me. Imagine that any institution worthy of its name, like Joy FM, Joy FM, would sit down and then put out a message as dangerous dangerous as this, as ethnocentric as this? What was it meant to, what was it calculated to achieve if it was not to damage me and in the process consume the whole country in something quite abominable? I don't understand. But if
do you then regret making those statements?
Nonsense. What do you mean by, you see, you are compounding the situation by this question you just asked. Why do I regret when I was stating a fact? I was stating a fact to the effect that the people from Togo, Togolese are not Ghanaians, unless of course you have some definition of Togolese which means Ghana. I don't know.
But one will also argue that yes, you made the point that during the first round, we are talking about 2008 elections.
You see, but that is no. That's not it. I mean, those things. If I say those things and factually I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's politics. You say this, you are wrong about that.
Member of Parliament for Adansi Asokwa there, Katie Amon, speaking to Lateef Idris, he claims that there is an agenda against him. Lateef did try to not really convince him, but to let him know that there possibly couldn't have been any agenda. But just for clarity, for purposes of clarity, let's play back to you exactly what he said and exactly what statement was put out there on social media. Listen.
The Togolese and the Votarians, and when I'm talking about is Volta region, I mean, there is the kind of, remember the history, Professor, if you guys know the history about this place, basically the same tribe. So they walk in, come, but they are not Ghanaians. I mean, when they walk in there, they can do whatever they do. So I guess that is the reason for that. See, there's a classic example. You remember 2008, the second round? We had so much, 100,000 or so votes leading from Samir at the time of second round. The next round, one constituency, what's the name? Which one? No. Ketu South also, it cleared all the whatever we had. Where did they come from? You see, so everybody from whatever they came to vote. So this is what the whole thing is about. We want.
There's no clear evidence to that.
Well, that's what you say. There is, if those people voted, 35,000 or so at the time voted. The next one, everybody else on earth voted. Where were they coming from? So this is the whole issue. We want there to be sanity. The military is there to make sure that you vote if you are Ghanaian. You vote if you have the right, constitutional right in Ghana to vote. That's all there is. They are not electoral officers, but they are peace-keeping force. They are keeping the peace.
The borders are already shut.
No. The whole strength of it, the flower is shut, but it's a flower the only whatever. So the soldiers, the immigration, the police, they are just maintaining the peace, making sure that there's no infiltration. I mean, come on, let's be serious. What is the point in going through all that we've gone through to Supreme Court, all that, then allow a porous border for people to come through and then infiltrate, and then to infiltrate the register again? We would have been back to where we started.
As I said, for purposes of clarity, that is exactly what the Member of Parliament said and exactly what was put out there on social media, which generated the response on social media. But talking about security and deployment to other parts of the country, let's get on Zoom. I'm being joined by Emmanuel Bombande. He's a conflict resolution and peace building, conflict resolution and peace building professional. You can call him an expert as well on that. He's joining me on Zoom. So we'll pick his thoughts on this development. Mr. Bombande, thank you very much for your time this evening. I just want to find out, I'm particularly interested. Government says one thing, the NDC says another. To what extent will these developments play out when it comes to conflict resolution? We know elections come with conflicts that necessarily have to be resolved.
Thank you for the way you have framed the question. If you begin with the context in which we find ourselves, you can understand that it is normal that when we prepare for elections, and that because of the nature of elections being competitive as they are, they create a certain environment, and how policy making and decision making, whether it's about the coordination of security or whether it's about the conduct of elections, then begins to feed into the situation we find ourselves. So my first observation is this: facts would always exist, even if we try to ignore their existence. What basically this means is to say that we have our truth that belong to us depending on who is making the comment and how that comment is being made. But in these facts that are owned by those who are stating them, keep in mind that at the end of the day, we should interrogate ourselves as a people on the basis that under the Fourth Republic, we claim that our democracy has matured, and yet every 4 years, there is so much anxiety and tension when we're going towards elections. And so the key question we must ask is, it's not about whether the statements that have been put across are fact or not, depending on the ones who put those statements. It's about how are we collectively owning, as a people of Ghana, what is the collective truth. And I think today, Ghanaians would be asking, will the collective truth lead to a credible and a peaceful general election?
How do you answer that?
Yes. Yeah, I thought you were coming in.
Yeah, I was asking, how do you answer this particular question that you put out there?
Yes, so the question I'm asking is, we can spend all the time talking about what I call the smaller, insignificant issues. So I'm inviting us to think about the bigger picture. For example, if you look at Honorable K.T. Amon, Joy FM is never the problem. And I want to be the advocate for journalists to have the courage to do their work. His voice clip was heard across the nation. So he must be accountable to himself. And nobody needs to ask him to be accountable to the people of Ghana. If he chooses not to be accountable, it is not the media he should blame for creating a problem for him. And that is why, at this time leading into December, the individual responsibility to hold ourselves accountable and have the integrity and honesty to be people who want to lead and to serve matters more than what you see happening that is pervasive and beginning to create anxiety.
So, Mama,
that's the point I wanted to make.
Okay, let me ask my final question, which is to be that today at the press conference, they gave out details of the number of troops we have across the country. And I know that Operation Conquered Fist has been in operation for some time now. I mean, we did a comprehensive work on the state of our borders. And about that time, we got to know that Operation Conquered Fist was already being done. But today at the press conference, in the bit clearly states the fact that this is an operation going on. The defense minister put out a number of people that we have, or a number of military troops that we have across the country. Some people have said that this actually has the potential of jeopardizing the country's security.
Thank you. And this question helps to probably be better in responding to your earlier question. So what the defense minister sought to do was to put out the facts. But you must understand the facts in the context that we are relating with today. So the first question is, why didn't he brief the people of Ghana on the same facts he presented today much earlier when the deployment started? Because that would have made Ghanaians to see and understand differently the facts he presented today and how they relate to the context today. Secondly, I read his statement, and I want to put this emphasis. It is not the contestation about the facts and whether deployments have not happened elsewhere. It is the feeling of discrimination that the chiefs and the people in the Aflao area, from their own statement, appear to suggest to be the problem. In other words, if you are deploying across all the borders of Ghana, the people of Aflao cannot feel discriminated against. And secondly, keep in mind that all the conflicts we've experienced in Ghana, including the Konkoma Nanumba conflict, and excuse me to use this example, because when the defense minister spoke, he even said that there are more troops in the northeastern part of the country where Konkombas are in a majority. But he, and I know him very well, and he knows me very well.
But I wanted to find out if it does it jeopardize? Do you put in the figures out there?
Perception of discrimination.
Okay, we've run out of time, so I just wanted you to clarify for me, from your perspective, does putting the figures out there jeopardize, does it have the potential of jeopardizing the country's security? If you can briefly answer that for me.
No, that for me is not the issue.
Okay.
The issue is allow your policies not to create a sense of discrimination and exclusion. Simple.
Okay. Mr. Bambandia, thank you very much for your time this evening and for your patience. So I've been talking to conflict resolution, peace building and development expert Emmanuel Bombande, who joined me via Zoom on this situation. You're still watching Joy News Prime with me, Gifty Ando Apia. How about we take a short break here? We'll be right back.
Ghana, Ernest Addison, says structures are in place to enforce regulations against the dollarization of the economy. Speaking to Joy Business, President of PEF, Nanose Bonsu, insists the central bank must bite harder to act as a deterrent to corporates.
Economy should not be dollarized because in most countries you can do that. So Bank of Ghana is in the right approach when they say that you cannot do anything with the dollar marking. So that is a no-go area that I support 100%, because once you take the dollar out of the equation, then people are going to wake up. It's going to take some time, but it's going to wake up like this is a CD and that's a CD. But the guy has not made any difference, had not changed the product, had not added anything. The moment the dollar goes up against our currency, and sometimes it's not because of our currency weaknesses, because the dollar is strength. And it's gone out against our currency. This guy selling bread increases the price of the bread. What's the position? On the basis of what? Okay, so that Bank of Ghana action to me is the right thing to do. It might take some doing, but I think some legal issues have to be ironed out and then punish the people who do not play ball.
Meanwhile, PEF says it backs the governor of the Bank of Ghana on a case he made before the Public Accounts Committee that the BOG has no parochial interest in the fall of the city. This comes after the bank posted a record earnings of 1.8 billion cedis in 2019. Nanose Bonsu argues the shortfalls of the city is largely due to external forces amid the coronavirus.
Well, I don't think anybody at Bank of Ghana consciously will be doing anything to profit from the foreign exchange, the volatility. I disagree on the angle of how we maintain our monetary policy on the part of how we support our currency. But that doesn't mean that somebody consciously is profiting to show a bottom line of profit margins for the institution at the detriment of the economy. I don't think so.
So far, the coronavirus is said to have affected various sectors of the Ghanaian economy, with GDP estimates expected to tumble in 2020.
Meanwhile, Bank of Ghana is warning Ghana's ability to pay back debt on time in the coming month could be under threat. George Wiafe has been going through the central bank's recent fiscal development report and has the details.
The Bank of Ghana's warning is influenced by fears that the rising budget deficit and how that could negatively impact on the country's total debt stock. This, the bank fears, could soon affect government's ability to pay its debt back on time. For instance, based on the first quarter numbers, government ended March this year spending 13 billion Ghana cedis more than revenue projected. The situation, the Bank of Ghana says, has also been compounded by the coronavirus-related spending. But Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, has argued that looking at the current situation, it might not be in a position to provide the needed financial cover to contain this rising deficit.
If the situation does not improve and it becomes protracted, the central bank would not be able to provide the additional resources that will be needed if we are not to undermine all the gains that we have made over the last 3 years.
The Bank of Ghana's comment is coming on the back of a recent warning from the IMF and the World Bank that Ghana is still seen as a high risk of debt distressed country, a warning to the country's investors and development partners that it could struggle to pay its debt back on time. This is despite recent expansion of the economy. The country's total debt stock ending March this year stands at 236 billion Ghana cedis, and there are fears that it could be hitting record levels when the numbers are updated by the Bank of Ghana.
And still on the financial sector, the Coalition of Aggrieved Fund Management Customers has renewed pressure on government to pay monies owed them. Members say life has become unbearable for the over 128,000 affected persons who invested in 53 collapsed companies. Here's a report by Nana Sensu-Mensah.
Members began the press conference by observing a minute's silence for the departed colleagues they say died from agony over their locked-up funds. Amid chants of the popular "We Can't Breathe" slogan, they accused government of failing to respond to their cry since 2018. They are vowing to seek refuge in the opposition NDC with their votes if their money is not paid by end of July. Charles Nyame, a spokesperson.
We are requesting the government to approve payment of our funds by July 2020, failure for which we, together with our families, our loved ones, our sympathizers, our well-wishers, all of us would throw our support behind former President John Dramani Mahama. During this year's general elections, considering that the former president has come out to categorically assure us of full payment in the event that he wins the 2020 general elections.
The group questions government sincerity with its COVID-19 stimulus package for businesses while ignoring victims of the financial sector cleanup.
Even though our predicament is worse than the COVID-19 pandemic, government seems to show more attention at helping businesses who have been affected by the pandemic with stimulus packages than finding a solution to our situation. How should a government borrow money to give to businesses as stimulus package and neglect us for a problem that they themselves created? We therefore wish to remind the government to know that if the energy crisis and the teacher trainees allowances scrapped off by the Mahama government and the nursing trainees allowances struck off by the Mahama government could contribute to his loss in 2016 election, even though the energy crisis was not deliberately created by President Mahama, then President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo should also know that history will repeat itself in 2020 elections.
Meanwhile, leaders urge members nationwide to massively turn out to register during compilation of a new electoral roll in order to exercise their franchise in December.
We call on all our members, together with our families, our friends, that when the voter registration commences, let all of us do everything possible to register massively and vote massively against President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo if he refused to pay our money before elections.
Nana Sensu-Mensah reporting.
Well, away from that, this is how trading opened for the week on the commodity markets. Crude oil traded for $41.79 a barrel, while precious mineral gold went for $1,769.41 an ounce. Here are the market figures. I'll be your business for now. Log on to myjoyonline.com/business for more business news updates. My name is Sandra Esinam. I've been anchoring from home.
Certainly you are anchoring from home, and we're here in the studio. Sandra, I do have a surprise for you. Guess what?
Oh, tell me, is it about Liverpool?
Oh, please. Is that why you're wearing red? Then sorry. Well, Becky is here in the studio. Hi, Becky. Say hi to Sandra.
Oh, Becky.
Oh, I know. I miss you too. Hold on.
How are you?
Fantastic, honey.
Oh, dear.
Oh, look at you.
I miss you, Becky. Great to have you back.
Okay. Okay, baby.
All right, the channel is not for you too. All right, so we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll tell you about entertainment. As Becky is here, you know what time it is. You're back here on Joy News Prime with me, Gifty Ando Apia. I've been joined in the studio, of course, by Becky, who'll be giving us entertainment, but we're connecting with someone who is working from home, Oreku Ampofo. He seems to be eating a lot. Oreku, what's in sports?
Hi, Gifty. So for sports today, we do start off some really big news for Ghana football. One that might bring some suspense because the Executive Council of the Ghana Football Association would hold a crunch meeting tomorrow to decide the future of the current campaign. Now, the deadline was set by the president of the association, Mr. Kraku, who has always hinted that the definite decision would be taken on the 2019-20 league season on June 30th. Now, the meeting would be taken into account the consultation with the various stakeholders and experts on whether to annul, truncate, or continue with the league.
Okay, right. Oreku, do continue with us. What next do we have on your bill?
And so before we do go, it's been a very long one, in terms of the transfer news. But one big story that did come around was former Chelsea, Real Madrid, and Bayern Munich attacker Arjen Robben, who planned to return to football to his boyhood club Groningen. Now, that is at age 36, and that was pretty incredible. Remember that Robben himself retired in 2019 after a career in which he won more than 30 club trophies. Now, however, he hopes to be back in action for the 2021 season to help Groningen, who have been badly hit by the coronavirus. I'll be telling you more in the second segment of sports.
Oreku, thank you very much. Oreku, they have to go to the Jubilee House. President Akufo-Addo, we understand, will be talking about the voters' registration, which starts tomorrow. It looks like he has started already. We need to go there now.
Fellow Ghanaians, good evening. Tomorrow, 30th June 2020, the Electoral Commission will begin the process of compiling a new register of voters, which the Commission will use for the 7th December 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections. The compilation of a voters' register is one of the most important tasks in the effective functioning of any democracy, because if an eligible citizen's name is not on the register, that citizen cannot exercise the right to vote and cannot therefore participate in the determination of the choice of the government of the day. It is thus vitally important that all eligible voters register, so on the designated day of 7th December, they can vote to choose the president of the nation and the member of parliament of their area. In effect, our vote, our thumb, is the expression of our individual sovereign power as a citizen, which we should cherish and guard at all times. Our country, Ghana, is regularly cited as the shining example of the place in Africa where the electoral process works and where it is always being improved upon. We have had 7 consecutive presidential and parliamentary elections, which has given us 5 presidents in the 27-year history of the Fourth Republic, with peaceful transfers of power from a governing to an opposition party on 3 separate occasions. It is a record virtually without parallel on the African continent, which we should all treasure. All of these did not threaten the foundations of the state. And even when there was disagreement with the result of an election, it was the Supreme Court, rather than the streets, that determined its outcome. From tomorrow, in 33,367 polling stations across the country, we embark on yet another journey to deepen further our nation's democratic credentials, as the exercise to compile a new voters' register to be used for the December 7 general elections commences. The hurdle which stood in the way of the new voters' register was surmounted last Thursday, 25th June, when a 7-member panel of the Supreme Court, presided over by the Chief Justice, in a unanimous decision, settled all the issues surrounding the voters' register. The decision affirmed the right of the Electoral Commission to proceed with the compilation of a new register in accordance with the provisions of Constitutional Instrument CI 126. It reiterated the widely held belief that a credible electoral register, and indeed a credible election, are important ingredients to securing the future well-being of any democratic nation. I am proud to be a citizen of a nation whose independent institutions, like the judiciary and the Electoral Commission, continue to operate without fear or favor, ill will or malice, and without regard to the political, religious, or ethnic affiliations of any citizen or group of citizens. There are some who have argued, and continue to argue, that in the midst of a pandemic, the compilation of a new register, and indeed the conduct of the parliamentary and presidential elections, should be put on hold and scheduled for a later date, perhaps when the pandemic ends. That is not possible. The Constitution of our Republic makes no provision for the extension of the mandate of the President, who wields executive power, beyond 4 years. To exercise executive power in the Ghanaian state, you must be duly elected by the Ghanaian people. You must have their freely expressed consent. On 7th January 2021, when my mandate as the current president expires, a duly elected person must be ready to be sworn in as President of the Republic. There is no other way. And in order to forestall any needless constitutional controversy, which could throw our nation into jeopardy, we must vote on 7th December 2020. The same applies to Parliament. We should not fear or be alarmed. Despite the COVID pandemic, elections are being properly conducted in many nations across the globe. In Asia, we've witnessed the conduct of a successful election of South Korea in April, at the height of the pandemic in that country. In Europe last week, we have seen those of Poland. And in our own continent of Africa, both Mali and Malawi have preceded us in organizing successful national elections. Surely, it is not beyond Ghana to join these nations in organizing a successful general election, even in the midst of the pandemic. Fellow Ghanaians, we have chosen to govern our country according to the tenets of multi-party democracy and the principles of democratic accountability. And we dare not trade them off, more so during times of crisis. To guarantee the safety of all eligible Ghanaians at the 33,377 polling stations across the country, the Electoral Commission has put in place the necessary elaborate protocols as outlined earlier in the day by the chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Jean Mensa. All these protocols should be adhered to strictly. Additionally, I want to remind all Ghanaians that all the other protocols and restrictions, especially those dealing with large gatherings, must be adhered to and enforced at the polling stations at all times. So let us all abide by them and conduct ourselves in a manner befitting the image and status of Ghana. So I urge all eligible Ghanaians, I repeat, all eligible citizens, that is, Ghanaians of 18 years of age or above, and of sound mind, no matter what party they belong to, if any, to go out and register so that they can exercise their civic responsibilities on 7th December to elect a government of their choice in a free, fair, peaceful, and transparent election. Using your God-given and constitutional rights costs nothing, but staying home can come at a very steep price. The pandemic notwithstanding, we have to strengthen Ghanaian democracy. It must be our collective duty to ensure that we have a register that is fit for purpose in December, and we must all make sure that persons who do not meet the requirements as set out clearly in the Constitution do not find their names into the register. If you aid the registration of an ineligible person and you are caught, you will face the full rigors of the law. The election on 7th December must be a Ghanaian election, not a West African election, conducted with a register of Ghanaian voters. That is the only way the true will of the Ghanaian people can manifest. It is crucial that both the registration exercise along our borders is another dimension of this process of guaranteeing the peace of the nation. Fellow Ghanaians, it is no secret that our neighbor to the north, Burkina Faso, has in recent times been at the receiving end of a number of terrorist attacks, as has another neighbor, Côte d'Ivoire. To shore up our borders against such attacks and to defend our nation's territorial integrity, the armed forces, at least since I came into office, have been very proactive in engaging in operations to secure our borders and foil any potential terror attacks on our soil. Operations such as Conquered Fist and Kwandungu have been going along for some time, since 21st February 2019, to meet this objective. Deployments of soldiers in areas along our borders have been regular, and residents living in border towns will bear testimony to this. Again, in the fight against COVID-19, I took the decision on Saturday, the 21st of March, to close all our borders by land, air, and sea. To ensure substantial compliance with this directive and to assist personnel of the Immigration Service, our eastern, western, and northern borders were shored up by some personnel from the military. This development, for example, during the period of the 3-week lockdown of Accra, Tema, Kasoa, and Kumasi, led to the arrest of some 5,000 persons along our borders who had entered our country illegally. Indeed, the first 6 recorded cases of COVID-19 in the Volta region, for example, were those of West African nationals who entered the country illegally. In total, 207 soldiers have been deployed along the borders of the Upper East region, 110 soldiers in the northern region, 102 in the Northeast region, 98 in the Volta region, 72 in the Oti region, 69 in the Upper West region, 64 in Bruno region, 21 in Savannah region, and 14 in the Western region. Let me state, without any form of equivocation, that these deployments are not in any way intended to prevent or prevent Ghanaians from registering to vote in December. They are there for their express purpose, which is to guard our borders. That is the limit of their remit, and they will not be permitted to stay beyond that remit. I'm fully aware, like the military commanders, of the sensitivity of their deployments at this position in our history. And I'm confident that that sensitivity will be fully respected. I have no interest in disenfranchising any eligible Ghanaian from registering in tomorrow's exercise, nor am I interested in any improper machinations to win any election. I've spent my life fighting for free democratic institutions in our country, and I'll continue in that fight for the rest of my life. The idea of being a president who emerges from a rigged election is abhorrent to every fiber of my being. I want to continue to be the president of a Ghanaian people who have given me their free consent with the blessing of the Almighty. So please, once again, if you are 18 years of age and above and are of sound mind, from tomorrow or the appointed time, go to your polling station and register. If you do not register now, you cannot vote in December. Present your Ghana passport or card, which are the only two forms of valid identification. In the absence of any of these valid IDs, an applicant can submit one completed identification guarantee form endorsed by 2 registered voters to be registered and issued with a voter ID card. By these procedures, all eligible voters will be registered. No disenfranchisement of voters is contemplated by them. Together, and adhering to the safety protocols at the polling stations, let us demonstrate that even during a pandemic, we in Ghana continue to be a beacon of democracy on the continent. Our democracy requires not a unity of ideas or political allegiances, but a unity of commitment to the Ghana project. The free, democratic, open, prosperous, and united nation, respectful of human rights and the rule of law, that animated our forefathers to make the sacrifices for the liberation of our nation from foreign rule, that has bequeathed to us our beloved Ghana. May God bless us all in our homeland Ghana and make her great and strong. I thank you for your attention and have a good night.
Just gone by, President Akufo-Addo with a national address ahead of the voter registration, which begins tomorrow. Like I said, my colleague Evans Mensah will be joining me and Winston Amwa as well. So we have a little bit of analysis on this. But just to give you a summary, if you're just joining us, the president talks about the voters registration that's going to start tomorrow. He begins with a reminder of the need to register. So that's the first time he talks about the need to register, that you will be able to select who becomes president, who becomes your MP. But then he talks about, he gives a historical background, talking about the 7 presidential and parliamentary elections that we have had, and 3 separate transfer of power, which has been smooth, he says. And then he urges you to go and use your God-given and constitutional right. And he's talking about eligible people going out there. He warns that if you support anybody who is ineligible to vote, the law will not be very easy dependency on you. And then he talks about something that has dominated discussions over the weekend up until now, terrorist attacks. He talks about security at the borders, which is something we'll be talking about. He goes on then to talk about the pandemic, voting or registering within the pandemic. Let me go over Zoom. Evans Mensah is joining me. Hi, Evans. Evans, you're muted. Unmute for me.
Here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, you'll be the first to start my unmuting classes. I hear you now. Evans, it's good to have you. Winston, are you there? Okay, Winston will join me later. Evans, first of all, and I know you follow the president, I was trying to go through the summary. Hopefully I was able to capture it. How, for you, important is such an address at this time?
Very important. It was absolutely critical. We are, I must say, at a very important crossroads between the 2020 elections on December 7th and the voters register. And I must actually argue that the compilation of voters register will probably be more contentious than the 2017 elections, all because of what has happened in the lead up to it. I'm talking about the registration exercise and all that has happened today, hours before the registration began. It was absolutely critical that as the commander-in-chief of the Ghana Armed Forces and the president of the Republic, that he addresses the country and attempts to allay fears. The big question tonight is whether or not he has succeeded in allaying the fears of those who believe that something sinister is at play in the way the Electoral Commission has handled the processes leading to the voter registration exercise, and also the contentious subject of the deployment of the military along our borders. That is, for me, the biggest unknown. We have to wait to see how people react to this. But to the question of whether this was important, it was absolutely critical, as important as his first address to the nation following our COVID-19 outbreak locally.
So let's take a look at the content. We've talked about, you know, the whole idea of this presentation, but then looking at the content, the president talks about the need to register so that you're able to exercise your, what he calls your God-given constitutional right. And then he goes on to talk about the terrorist attacks. He links it to this conversation that's been raging on social media since the weekend up until now, talking about the number of troops we have stationed across. And then I find interesting, Evans, also a number of repetitions, if you like, that essentially reminds people to go out and vote, to register, because if you don't do that, you cannot vote in December, in the December elections. What do you make of the content so far? We can begin with the security deployment.
Now, he comes to the point of talking about the security deployment after he had addressed something that had been linked to it, which is the fact that only eligible Ghanaians should register and the right to vote. Before that, he makes the point that this is not a West African election.
Yeah.
It is not a West African registration. It is a Ghanaian registration. He makes that point before he comes to address the question about the military deployment. And I think that chronology is important. The president is trying to emphasize to us, and it's constitutionally so, that you have to be a Ghanaian and of sound mind to vote, which means that you have to be a Ghanaian to register. Now, the key question is, I guess the debate is not about whether or not only Ghanaians should register. I think everybody agrees only Ghanaians should register. I think the debate has revolved around, how do you ensure that only Ghanaians register? Is it by deploying military men along the...
Okay. Yeah, it looks like Evans froze up on me, but we'll certainly raise him back. Let's fix that delay in the transmission, but Evans was talking about a chronology which he finds very important, where the president talks about the fact that this is not a West African election or a registration, but a Ghanaian one. Evans, continue from where you left off.
Yes. You can hear me all right?
I do.
Okay, great. I was just making a point that what the president stated about the elections are, well, the registration and the elections are only open to the Ghanaian, and that it's not a West African election, and it's not a West African registration to vote. He was only stating facts as has been enshrined in our laws. My point is, that isn't really what the controversy is about. The controversy is not about whether or not our registration to vote and the voting itself is open to foreigners or Ghanaians. I think everybody agrees that the registration and elections are only open to Ghanaians. The controversy has been about how do you make sure that only Ghanaians actually get to register to vote. That was the controversy. Is it by deploying military men and security forces to the borders so you prevent West African neighbors who aren't Ghanaians coming into Ghana to vote? That's one of the key questions. Or is it about limiting the identification documents you require to get onto the voters' registration exercise to those documents you can trust only Ghanaians can take possession of? And that question has been a question that has dogged us for years. It was a key question in the Abu Ramadan case. It's been a key question in the last three Supreme Court cases that have gone to the court, the three cases that the Supreme Court and the High Court have now categorically decided on. And the last point about the deployment of the military, which again, the president had said, and again, it's important to know the president's point, that the deployment was so, and this is something that he had maintained, and he's a commander-in-chief, the backstop was him. He says fundamentally was deployed because of COVID-19. But then he makes the point when he talks about deployment that their duty is also to ensure that the borders are protected. Now, it is the timing is important. Now, clearly from what he said tonight, even if you believe what the defense minister said today at the press briefing, that the deployment had been done since March, the president said tonight, and if my recollection is accurate, that there has been a beefing up of the military men and the security along the border, which means that we've seen an increased number. I guess that is where the suspicion is. People say, well, why are you increasing the number at this time, hours to the registration? The president has addressed it. It is up to people, those with real stake and interest in the electoral process, the political parties, to believe him, but he's made his case.
All right. Well, Evans, I just wrap up. I need to wrap up because I've run out of time right now on this. But he ends by saying that he's aware of the sensitivities of this deployment. But then he says he has no interest in disenfranchising or anyone or engaging in any improper machinations to win elections. But this is certainly a position that the minority or the opposition NDC disagrees vehemently. They believe that there is a clear agenda, there is a plan to rig this election in favor of him.
Well, that again is the NDC's prerogative to assert that. And as we expect, the MPP and the president had denied that. The thing about what is happening now, and I was making a point to a colleague, a friend recently, that it's almost as if this is repeated itself. Anytime you're going into the election, the opposition party tends to level accusations against the incumbent government. The incumbent government denies it about potential rigging. It happened in 2016. The NPP, then in opposition, did the same, leveling all manner of accusations against the Electoral Commission led by Charlotte Osei and against John Dramani Mahama, that there was a rigging machinery in place and that the voter register then was bloated. Right. They even held a big press conference, and Bawumia put out statistics to show that 70,000 odd people had, from Togo had come and voted illegally.
Yeah, Evans,
I'll have to won the elections.
Yeah, Evans, I'll have to unfortunately rudely interrupt you on there because I've run out of time. I need to make time for your show as well, PM Express, and I'm sure that you can extend the conversation there before you even put on your your what's on the bill. Evans, thank you so much for bringing us into your home, our fellow Ghanaian, this evening. Evans Mensah will be up at 9 p.m. with PM Express. He has a whole panel, 4 strong men who will be talking with him on PM Express. My name is Gifty and it's always a pleasure coming your way. Let's do this again tomorrow. But log on to myjoyonline.com for more news. Thank you.